most southerly part of Scotland at the Mull of Galloway. I'm John Ross, born and brought up in this part of Scotland, and for 9 years I had the privilege of being a commissioner with the Northern Lighthouse Board. And today I have with me Dr. Barry Miller, someone who taught in local secondary schools, taught science for a number of years, also did some scientific research, and when he retired he took on the role of retained lighthouse keeper. Barry, what does that involve?
Well, I've been doing it for just on 20 years, John. I do first line maintenance on the lighthouses in Ayrshire and Galloway. There's about 10 lighthouses involved. So I'm out about 50% of days, I suppose. I'm on call 24/7, so I'm relatively busy.
So you know the area well?
I know, well, like yourself, I'm actually from the area,
Yeah.
So yes, I know the area extremely well, yes.
But we're here at the Mull of Galloway
Indeed.
Lighthouse. It's a splendid example of a lighthouse. Can you
Yes.
tell us a bit about the history and what happens here?
I can, yeah. Well, this is a fairly old lighthouse. I think it was opened in 1830. Like all lighthouses now, it operates on electricity. Originally it would have operated on sperm whale oil. This is one of about half a dozen lighthouses that the Northern Lighthouse Board has opened to the public.
Right.
And I believe you were a commissioner at the time that the sale was put through. Is that correct?
I was indeed.
Yeah.
I was a commissioner, and because it's the marine industry that pays for
That's
the
correct,
lights,
yes, yes.
anything that's surplus has
Yes.
had to be sold off.
Yes,
But fortunately, it coincided with a period when this part of Wigtonshire got some funding together to restore their tourism after the foot and mouth outbreak.
Right.
And they were able to put a bid in to buy the redundant property. I was actually on the board at that time, and I did my very best.
Right. No, it's very good. No, we have about half a dozen that are open to the public. In fact, our one and only function is really to provide reliable marine navigational aids around the Scottish and the Isle of Man coasts. But nonetheless, we realise that we're custodians of some wonderful buildings. We have close on 200 lighthouses, almost all of which are listed buildings. Very many are in the top category of listing as being buildings of national importance. So we absolutely very much appreciate that, and you can see from the condition of the buildings that we look after the buildings as well as we can. And where we are able to operate with a local group such as here, we'll put in a huge amount of time and effort to ensure that we give as much support as we possibly can.
Yes,
and this has certainly been a big success as far as the
And I know that on this project we're looking at a number of lighthouses.
Yes.
And I would have to say that this is the jewel in the crown because it's fairly accessible.
Yes.
There are facilities here so that visitors can enjoy a trip here.
Yes.
Whereas some of the other lighthouses are not quite accessible.
In actual fact, you can only drive on the mainland to about a third of our lighthouses.
Yes.
The rest are on islands. Right enough, you can drive to them. And other mainland lighthouses, you have to walk across moorland, field, along cliff edges, and some, of course, are on rocks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's relatively accessible.
But we are here today. The weather's not ideal, but on a clear day, you can see Scotland.
Yes.
You can see England.
That's correct.
You can see the Isle of Man.
Yes.
And you can see Ireland.
Ireland, indeed you can, yes.
And there are others who would say you can also see the Kingdom of Heaven.
That's
so
right.
Not a bad view from
No,
where we're at.
No. You can certainly see a lot from this point. Yeah. I was going to mention, you mentioned the weather there.
Yeah.
Obviously it's a very windy day and there's been a lot of power outages in the Shire this overnight.
Yes.
Not here in actual fact. I was just going to say that it's perhaps not appreciated that the lighthouses which are on mains nonetheless run on batteries. So we have to have a backup whereby the light can run for at least 30 hours on battery supply should the mains power be interrupted. And with terms of power interruption, lighthouses are always at the very, very end of the line.
Yes.
So if anybody's going to get a power cut, it's us. Hence we actually run them on big banks of batteries.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course nowadays I understand that a number of particularly rock stations are now run on solar power.
Well, our eventual aim, and we're working through our lighthouses, our eventual aim is to run them all on solar power and not be reliant on the grid at all. So in the meantime, we've concentrated on rock stations and island stations, and I would say they're almost all done. We've done a few on the mainland to date, but within a few years we should have them all on solar panels, and we're obviously moving towards LED lighting as well, so there's less power consumption.
You were saying,
I think that's the way forward, yes.
You were saying it's over 200 years since this light was built. It's
Yes.
quite interesting. I noticed on our way
Yes.
down.
Not quite in actual fact,
No.
it was 1830, so
1830.
we're not quite on
Not
the
quite
200,
there.
but almost.
But what was interesting, there's a bay just a small distance
Yes,
north of
yes,
here.
yes.
Can you see why there's a harbour there?
Right,
that remains.
that was the supply for the lighthouse keepers, so their supplies would come in here. The lighthouse keepers would be more or less self-sufficient. They would have their own cattle, they'd have a milk supply, they'd grow their own veg. Coal would be supplied, so the supplies would come in by boat
Right.
for the keepers.
Right,
Yeah.
and would that also be used when they were building the...
I imagine it would have been, John, but
Yes.
I'm not sure about that. Certainly that little jetty is the property of the Northern Lighthouse Board, as is the wee house which is
that's
beside it.
interesting. That's
So
very
yes,
interesting.
yes. So we have these wee bits and pieces all over the country.
Yes. You're saying about power supply. I mean, when you look at it here, although it's a mains power supply,
Yes.
we're about, 5 miles from the village of Dromore.
We are, yes, we are.
So,
yes.
you know,
Yes.
although it's mainland, it is still quite remote.
That's right, that's right. In fact, as I say, without exception, they're quite remote,
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that where we're standing, we can see the helipad. And of course, that's a relatively recent addition to the Northern Lighthouse Board's
Indeed.
abilities
Yeah. It's not so long since I had to have a generator brought in by helicopter to Corswell.
Oh, yes.
About 6 or 7 years ago, there was a heavy snowstorm here, and the power was out everywhere, and Corswell was out for 6 days, and they brought in a generator by helicopter to a similar helipad to that.
helipad. Yep. So, I think the other, I know that one of your colleagues here will be speaking about, but this is one of only two lighthouses left where, although the foghorn is not now reckoned needed for navigational purposes,
No.
this
Yes.
Mull of Galloway and Sombre Head in Shetland are the only two lighthouses where the foghorns have been restored and can be put on.
The foghorns were introduced from about 1890, as soon as they were effective diesel engines. And most of the main stations had foghorns. The last ones were discontinued in 2004.
Right.
But luckily, the equipment wasn't stripped out of the lighthouse, and most of them it was taken away and sold on and used for other purposes. But here it was just left.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky indeed that the group here have managed to restore that equipment and get it working again.
On one occasion, I spoke to a mariner and asked him, why the foghorns were shut down, and he explained to me that with the size of cargo ships and cruise ships, by the time you heard the foghorn, it was too late to take any corrective action.
Yes. No, I think they were certainly useful in the day, but I think those days are past.
And there was a very special occasion when the foghorn was recommissioned here, and I remember the lifeboat from Portpatrick and the small one from further south. They came up and the horn blew, and it was a very special occasion.
The keepers used to set the horn going when they couldn't see the scar rocks, across there. That was the signal.
That was the signal.
If the scar rocks were out of sight, they started the foghorn.
Good. And of course, like other lighthouses, there would be 3 keepers here.
That's right. Yes, 3. Yes. Yeah. Well, they had to have an extra one because of the foghorn, in actual fact. So they had to have someone who was mechanically qualified to look after the diesel engines.
And of course, the children, the lighthouse keepers, they would have to go the 5 miles.
That's right, to Dromore
School.
Indeed, they would.
Yep.
Indeed, they would. Yes.